High above Montana's unforgiving Badlands, a lone pilot in a vintage Cessna defies the might of modern F-15 jets, chasing a cryptic signal that threatens the heart of America's nuclear defenses. When the fighters move to intercept, a forgotten emblem on her plane, a relic of a buried past, stops them cold, unveiling a truth that rewrites aviation history. Welcome to Silent Stories, where we unearth tales of courage, sacrifice, and secrets that refuse to fade. Hit subscribe and join Silent Stories for gripping narratives that bring the past to life. The Montana sky was a vast, unyielding blue, scarred only by the razor-sharp contrails of two F-15 Eagles tearing through the air with predatory precision. Their target, a lone Cessna 172, its weathered paint glinting defiantly in the late afternoon sun. The civilian plane had breached restricted airspace near Malmstrom Air Force Base, a fortress of national security guarding nuclear missile silos. The lead pilot's voice crackled over the radio, edged with irritation. Unidentified aircraft, you're in restricted airspace. Identify yourself or be forced down. Silence met his command, the Cessna holding its course with a steadiness that seemed to mock the jet's advanced systems. Captain Rachel Holt, 38, gripped the yoke of her Cessna, her knuckles white but her hands steady. She wasn't a thrill-seeker or a lost hobbyist. Rachel was a former Navy pilot, her career shattered by a training accident that left her with a limp and a medical discharge. Now, she ran a small aerial surveying business in Bozeman, mapping Montana's wilds for researchers, ranchers, and environmentalists. Aviation was in her blood, a legacy spanning 3 generations. Her mother, Captain Laura Holt, had been a test pilot for experimental aircraft during the Cold War, working on projects so classified they were spoken of only in hushed family stories. Her grandfather had flown reconnaissance over Korea, his missions locked away in Pentagon vaults. The Cessna Rachel piloted, nicknamed Ghost, was no ordinary plane. Restored over 5 years in her hangar, it was a 1960s model equipped with analog instruments and a rare modification, a radio transmitter tied to a long-abandoned project called Phantom Signal. Rachel's life in Bozeman was quiet, almost reclusive. Her hangar sat on the edge of a dusty airfield framed by rolling hills and the distant, snow-capped Rockies. She spent her days surrounded by engine parts, technical manuals, and the faint scent of oil, piecing together vintage aircraft for collectors, historians, and filmmakers seeking authentic props. Ghost was her masterpiece, a tribute to the plane her mother had flown during classified tests. Every rivet, gauge, and control cable was restored with obsessive care, a testament to an era when pilots relied on skill, instinct, and mechanical intimacy rather than digital systems. To the locals, Rachel was the eccentric pilot obsessed with junkers. To her, Ghost was a living link to her family's past, a machine that hummed with history and purpose. Her days were solitary, but not lonely. Rachel found solace in her work, though the accident that ended her Navy career lingered like a shadow. The crash, a midair collision during a training exercise, had cost her a co-pilot and left her with a shattered knee and guilt she couldn't shake. She'd been cleared of fault, but the whispers of pilot error from her squadron had followed her into civilian life. Bozeman offered a fresh start, but the small town wasn't always kind. At the local diner, regulars teased her about flying museum pieces, and her limp drew pitying glances. Rachel bore it with a tight smile, her resolve hardened by years of proving herself in a world that doubted her. That morning, Rachel had taken off for a routine survey job, mapping a remote stretch of the Badlands for a geological study on seismic activity. The contract was simple: chart terrain, note anomalies, but as she cruised at 8,000 feet, her radio crackled with something unexpected. A faint, rhythmic pulse cut through the static, not the chatter of civilian air traffic but a coded signal, deliberate and precise. Rachel's heart skipped. She'd heard her mother describe this exact pattern in childhood bedtime stories when Laura's guard was down. Phantom Signal was a Cold War relic, a covert communication system designed to pierce enemy jamming during nuclear standoffs. It was meant to be dismantled, its equipment scrapped, its existence erased. Yet here it was, pulsing in her headset, emanating from the direction of Malmstrom's restricted zone. Rachel's mind churned. This wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. A signal from a project buried decades ago. Her mother's stories had been vague but vivid. Late-night flights, secret tests, a signal that could save pilots when all else failed. Laura had been proud but haunted, her career ending abruptly after a mission she'd never discussed. Rachel had inherited her mother's stubborn resolve and her knack for reading machines like they were extensions of herself. Ghost, with its analog systems, was immune to modern electronic countermeasures, unlike the digital heavy jets patrolling today's skies. If the signal was a threat, Rachel was uniquely equipped to chase it. She made a choice that would redefine her life. Banking Ghost toward the signal source, she crossed into restricted airspace, knowing the consequences: interception, arrest, or worse. The signal grew stronger, its cadence almost hypnotic, pulling her deeper into the forbidden zone. Her Navy training kicked in, assess the situation, decide swiftly, act decisively. Reporting the signal was an option, but it felt like abandoning her mother's legacy. This was personal, a call she couldn't ignore. She adjusted her headset, the pulse now a steady beacon, guiding her toward a remote canyon. The F-15s appeared minutes later, their sleek forms tearing through the sky like hawks. The lead pilot's voice returned, now laced with mockery. "Old-timer, lost your way to the airshow? Turn back now." Rachel stayed silent, her eyes scanning the rugged terrain below, jagged canyons, hidden valleys, perfect for concealing illicit activity. The signal's source was close, somewhere in the Badlands maze. The second F-15 pilot chimed in, chuckling. "Probably filming some stunt for YouTube. Let's ground her and get back to real work." Their words echoed the skepticism Rachel had faced for years. Her plane was outdated, her skills irrelevant. Each jab was a reminder of the crash, the whispers, the doubt. But she pushed it aside, her focus razor-sharp. Her hand brushed a worn patch on her flight jacket, the silver Outland Lightning emblem of the 77th Reconnaissance Wing, her mother's unit. Disbanded after the Cold War, its missions were so secret that even Rachel knew only fragments, whispers of high-stakes flights, coded signals, and sacrifices buried in classified files. The emblem was her talisman, a reminder of why she flew. She'd sewn it onto her jacket after finding it in her mother's belongings, a small act of defiance against a world that forgot. The signal pulsed louder, pulling her toward a narrow canyon. She knew the risks, but the rhythm in her ears felt like her mother's voice, urging her forward. The F-15s tightened their formation, one jet pulling alongside Ghost's port wing. Captain Ethan Morse, 32, leaned forward in his cockpit, expecting a confused civilian. Instead, he saw a woman in a flight jacket, her face etched with focus, piloting with a precision that belied her plane's age. Sunlight hit Ghost's fuselage, and a faded owl and lightning emblem gleamed briefly, stopping Morse's breath. He'd seen that mark in a classified briefing years ago, a footnote in a lecture on Cold War Black Ops. The 77th was a ghost story, a unit erased from official records. His voice trembled as he keyed his radio. "Control, we have a situation. Confirming 77th Recon marking on civilian aircraft. Repeat, 77th Recon." The radio fell silent. At Malmstrom's control center, chaos erupted. Controllers scoured databases that showed no trace of the 77th Reconnaissance Wing. The emblem's description triggered alerts in systems only senior officers could access. Secure lines buzzed to Pentagon offices handling secrets too sensitive for public knowledge. Officers who'd been sipping coffee were summoned to secure rooms, their faces grim as they realized the implications. In the sky, the F-15s held position, their pilots' earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. Morse spoke again, his tone now respectful. "Ma'am, identify yourself and state your intent. This is serious." Rachel's voice finally broke the silence, calm and authoritative. "This is Ghost 22. Conducting reconnaissance on an unauthorized signal in grid sector Delta 7. Request clearance to continue." Her words carried the weight of someone who'd flown combat missions, not a civilian playing hero. The control tower hesitated, standard protocols useless for a situation involving a squadron that didn't exist. After a tense minute, a senior officer's voice crackled through. "Ghost 22, maintain course. Escorts, observe and report only." The F-15s shifted, no longer intercepting but escorting, their sleek forms flanking Rachel's vintage Cessna. Through her canopy, she saw the contrast, cutting-edge technology beside mechanical heritage, united in a mission to protect the skies. The signal grew louder, guiding her to a narrow canyon where a small, unmarked drone skimmed the terrain, broadcasting the phantom signal. Its flight path was deliberate, weaving through the Badlands to probe Malmstrom's defenses. Rachel's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. The drone's signal was disrupting radar, a clear threat to the base's nuclear security. Ghost's analog systems were unaffected, its needle-and-dial instruments immune to the drone's electronic countermeasures. The F-15s, however, struggled. Morse's voice crackled with frustration. Control systems are compromised. Radar's flickering, GPS is unreliable. Rachel's voice cut through. Ghost 22 to control. Target acquired, unmanned craft, grid reference Echo 3. Consistent with unauthorized surveillance. Maintaining visual. The chase was on. The drone darted through the canyon, its advanced programming allowing it to hug the terrain, dodging detection. Rachel followed, Ghost's slower speed and tight maneuverability perfect for the tight turns. She felt the plane's every vibration, the hum of its engine, a conversation she'd learned from years in the cockpit. Her mother's lessons echoed, read the wind, trust the machine, stay sharp. The F-15s climbed higher, unable to navigate the canyon's hazards at high speed. Morse's voice returned, tinged with awe. Control, Ghost 22 is maintaining primary contact. Recommend we provide high cover. Rachel's mind flashed to her childhood, watching her mother work on aircraft in their garage. Laura had been a quiet woman, her stories sparse but vivid. She'd spoken of Phantom Signal as a lifeline for pilots in jammed skies, a project she'd tested under grueling conditions. Rachel had inherited her mother's stubborn resolve, her refusal to let history fade. Ghost was more than a plane. It was a vow to keep that legacy alive. Now, chasing a drone that threatened national security, she felt her mother's presence in the cockpit, guiding her hands. The drone's maneuvers grew desperate, skimming rock walls so close Rachel could see dust trailing its wings. She pushed Ghost to its limits, the engine roaring as she matched every turn. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her bad knee aching from the rudder pedals, but her focus was unbreakable. The signal's pulse filled her headset, a reminder of the stakes. If the drone's operators were testing Malmstrom's defenses, they could be planning something catastrophic. Rachel's Navy training had taught her to think 3 steps ahead, and she knew this wasn't just a rogue drone, it was a probe, possibly foreign, possibly a prelude to an attack. For 40 minutes, Rachel tracked the drone, noting its path, altitude shifts, and timing, critical for ground interception. The Badlands were a maze of rock and shadow, but she flew with an intimacy modern pilots rarely knew. She adjusted for crosswinds by feel, listened to Ghost's engine for performance cues, and navigated by landmarks, a skill honed in her Navy days. The drone's crew, likely remote operators, realized they were being followed. It began aggressive maneuvers, diving into narrower canyons, banking sharply to lose her. Rachel stayed on it, her Cessna threading through passes that would have grounded faster jets. Ghost 22, target evading through Canyon Complex Bravo, she reported. Recommend ground intercept at Grid Foxtrot 8. Her tactical precision stunned the controllers. This wasn't just a pilot. This was someone with strategic acumen. Ground teams mobilized, guided by her coordinates. The F-15 pilots, watching from above, marveled at Ghost's performance. Control, this is Eagle Lead, Morse said. Ghost 22's low-level pursuit is unmatched. We're staying high to avoid terrain. It was a humbling admission from pilots trained to believe technology trumped all. Rachel's thoughts drifted to Bozeman, to the people who doubted her. Her neighbor, Tom, a retired rancher, had once called her obsession with Ghost a waste of a good pilot. Her mechanic friend, Sarah, had urged her to modernize, to buy a new plane with GPS and autopilot. But Rachel knew something they didn't. Technology could fail, but skill endured. The crash that ended her Navy career had taught her that. She'd been leading a training flight when a rookie pilot misjudged a maneuver, clipping her jet. The explosion had taken her co-pilot, Lieutenant Mark Evans, a friend she'd promised to protect. Rachel had landed the burning jet, saving herself but not Mark. The guilt still woke her at night, her dreams filled with fire and his voice. Now in the canyon, she flew for Mark, for her mother, for every pilot who'd been dismissed as obsolete. The drone made a sudden climb to clear a ridge, exposing its sleek, unregistered design. Rachel closed the gap, confirming its markings, advanced tech, likely foreign. Ghost 22 to control, target confirmed as hostile drone. Grid Foxtrot 8, prepare for intercept. Ground teams moved swiftly, capturing the drone. Its payload revealed surveillance equipment and a transmitter broadcasting the phantom signal linked to a foreign entity probing U.S. nuclear defenses. As Rachel guided Ghost out of the canyon, her body ached, her knee throbbing, but her spirit soared. She'd honored her mother's legacy and protected her country. Landing at Malmstrom, she stepped from the cockpit to a crowd of base commanders, intelligence officers, and the F-15 pilots. Her limp was noticeable, but her posture was unyielding. The Owlan lightning emblem had sparked recognition, and the mood was electric with respect. Morse approached, his helmet under his arm. "Ma'am, I thought vintage planes were relics. You outflew us in ways I can't explain." Rachel met his gaze. "Your jets are incredible, Captain. But sometimes the old ways get the job done." The aftermath was swift. The Air Force issued a rare public statement acknowledging Rachel's role in thwarting a security breach. The 77th Reconnaissance Wing was partially declassified, its emblem restored to historical records. Laura Holt's sacrifices, years of silent service, were finally honored. Rachel felt a weight lift, knowing her mother's legacy was no longer a shadow. The F-15 pilots sought her out, eager to learn the manual flying skills that had saved the day. In a hangar with Ghost parked beside modern fighters, Rachel began a consulting role, teaching pilots to fly without digital crutches. Her first session drew 30 young aviators, their eyes wide as she explained Ghost's analog systems. "This plane taught me flying is about connection to the air, the machine, your instincts," she said. Lieutenant Ava Kim, 25, asked, "How do you trust yourself with no backup systems?" Rachel smiled, echoing her mother's words. "Know your plane like it's your heartbeat. That's your backup." The program grew, spreading across bases. Ghost became a symbol of resilience, proof that skill could outshine tech. Rachel's work didn't end there. Intelligence analysts uncovered more about the phantom signal, revealing it had been reactivated by a rogue group exploiting old Cold War tech. Rachel collaborated with investigators, sharing her mother's cryptic notes, pieced together from old journals. The signal's origins traced back to a secret base in Nevada where Laura had tested it under brutal conditions. Rachel visited the site, now abandoned, its rusted hangars whispering of her mother's courage. Standing there, she felt a connection deeper than ever, vowing to keep the 77th's legacy alive. Back in Bozeman, Rachel's hangar became a hub for pilots seeking her wisdom. Tom, the rancher, apologized over coffee, admitting he'd underestimated her. Sarah, the mechanic, started helping with Ghost's maintenance, fascinated by its simplicity. Rachel's story spread, inspiring a new generation. At an international aviation security conference, she spoke to global leaders. Over-reliance on tech creates vulnerabilities. The best defense is a pilot who can fly blind. Her curriculum centered on Ghost, taught pilots to read weather, feel engine changes, and navigate by stars. During a simulated cyber attack exercise, only her trainees completed their missions, their manual skills unshaken by disabled tech. Colonel Elena Martinez, who oversaw the drill, said, "Rachel Holt showed us the sky belongs to pilots, not just programs." Rachel never sought fame, finding peace in knowing her students were ready for the unknown. In her hangar, surrounded by vintage aircraft and modern training materials, she taught lessons bridging decades. Above her workbench hung photos. Her mother with the 77th's aircraft, Rachel with her students. "Some signals never fade," she told them. "They wait for the right ears to hear." In Montana's skies, Ghost still flew, its roar a testament to courage and skill guarding the heavens. Subscribe to Silent Stories if you believe the past still shapes our future.